Why your perfectionism irritates everyone. That's the title of this article as we continue through the focal subject of perfectionism with Psychology Today's November-December issue. That one's pretty direct, and I'm liking talking about perfectionism, so we're going to keep doing it with their articles. But this one, if you watched the previous video, talked about the difference between perfection and excellence and why it is healthier to lean towards excellence as a goal versus perfection. This article is a little bit more focused on the effects of other people, and it uses two definitions that I want to quote directly from because I think it is helpful. This is written by Gregory Chasson, I believe, pronounced the name, and I haven't been reading everyone's name. I don't remember to do that every time, so apologies for that for anyone who I'm leaving out. Here's the quote, which I think is interesting. Two forms of perfectionism, or being a perfectionist, so to speak. One is being inward focused, and the other is being outward focused in our perfectionism. So they focus like self-oriented. Perfectionism was the inward one. So that would be when we apply excessive standards and inflexible thinking to ourselves, but not necessarily to others. Self-oriented. When we are other-oriented, our perfectionism projects outward and targets other people in our lives. And the author does explain that people can be both of these things, but it's an interesting thing to reflect on if you deal with perfectionism. That question of, are you orienting that inward towards yourself? Is it self-oriented or is it other-oriented? Are you holding people to a certain standard, or are you holding yourself to a certain standard? Or, in some cases, are you doing both of those things? Regarding how this behavior affects other people, the first point the author makes is that of safety behaviors, and specifically two categories, again, in this one. And I would loosely define those as this perfectionism from a point of double checking everything. And that's probably not fair either. Triple, quadruple, quintuple checking everything, making sure nothing is wrong, and actually causing oftentimes a delay in the work that you are doing with maybe some improvements, but diminishing returns at the very least. So slowing down the people around you and the engagement in people around you. Think about it from a work perspective of a project not getting done on time because you're just checking everything so many times out of an anxiety towards being perfect. Not as a desire to be excellent, again, but as a desire to be perfect from a place of fear and anxiety. And the other side of that coin is overly asking for reassurance. Are you sure? Did I do this right? Is this okay? Questions like that, and how these affect people around you. They're anxiety induced from a state of perfection. I have to be right about this. I can't be wrong. I need to get it right. And instead it can cause procrastination too, which is a really, really interesting point that I'm glad they brought up, because this is true. This is stuff that I've looked into more outside of this, but we are more likely to ignore failure when we procrastinate, because not doing something, if we're procrastinating doing something, that's a form of failure, and it's actually for a lot of people a worse form of failure. So if you take going to the gym, you're like, I've been wanting to get in shape for a long time, and you're just not going, and you're just like, yeah, I'll do it later. That is more defeating to your goal than going and doing a poor job at it, because at least going, you're doing something. You're making some effort, and maybe you see such a small change, but you're aware of what's happening now. It's right in your face, like you're actually going, so you can see when you mess up more. When you procrastinate and put stuff off, or just choose not to look at what needs done, you can hide behind this guise, this fakeness of, I'm not actually seeing the failure, but in reality, you're failing worse than you would if you tried and saw in the moment failures. I hope that makes sense, but it's a fantastic concept that I think people need to be more aware of when it comes to how we set goals and behave in different ways. And yes, it does show up here in perfectionism, which I think is a great, maybe opposite into that perspective. Opposite wouldn't even be the right word, more just a different side of this is you want to do such a good job that you just never start. And I can relate to that. A lot of people can as well. They're too ambitious, so they don't do it. Even think about it on a small scale. Like you want to send someone a nice text or a nice email, or you want to show someone on their birthday that you care about them. You're like, I'm going to write them a card and get them a gift. And then you're like, I can't get around to doing the card. I can't I can't get a gift today. Oh shoot, and you don't do it at all. And it would have been better if you just would have texted them, or if you saw them at work, so, hey, happy birthday. That was better than the perfection goal that you set, because you didn't do anything with that other goal. Now, would it have been great if you did a letter and a card? Yeah, that's awesome, fantastic. But you did nothing. So your attempt to be perfect caused you to do nothing at all. And it's a good reminder for me and other people as well to remember that something is usually better than nothing. Yes, you can argue that there are times where that's not true, but action does something, and it's good to take steps. So set a goal to do your best with something, not to do it perfect or the exact standard that you set all the time. So safety behaviors, that's that one. Using anxiety to either not get things done, to need reassurance all the time, or to check way more times than you need to about how well the work has been done. The next point around how perfectionism can affect other people is moralism. So from a self-oriented view, that would be telling yourself that you don't deserve something because of the quality of work that you put out. So I don't deserve to have a break from work, even though I've been working for 14 hours, because I haven't done my best job, or I didn't do a good job yesterday, or I know this can be better. I'm not allowed to. This self-inflicted standard of moralism on yourself and your behavior. So that's one side of it. The other oriented side is doing it to other people, giving them a standard of you're not good enough because you didn't get this done, or you're a bad person because you messed this up or didn't do it right, and holding that to other people, which will often result in poor relationships and very likely people not wanting to be open and honest with you. Or if something doesn't go well, they're probably more likely to lie to make it not look like it's their fault because they don't want to deal with you and your behavior. So and I'm not calling anyone out with this, it's more just something to be aware of, as the author points out. Like, this is how perfectionism in these ways can trickle into other people's lives. And I do appreciate that the author goes into how this affects us when we're behaving this way, even though the focus of the article is on how we're affecting other people. So bear that in mind. It's not worth it to cast this judgment on yourself. And the hard part with a lot of this stuff is for people who are very hardworking or obsessed with things, or people who just have a high standard, it comes down to a balance. And that is different than this shaming experience. It's one thing to have a high standard and to have a high level of work ethic and to say, I'm going to do a fantastic job at this, and to even work way more than a normal person would at it. A lot of this comes down to what's actually happening internally to you and what are you doing to other people. That's a big line for, is this a perfectionist thing, or is this more of a personality thing for who you are? And we need to learn how to integrate that into your day-to-day without hurting people. And maybe you already do that. So moralism, there was point number 2. The third and final point the author makes is to consider social capital. And admittedly, this one was the least compelling one for me as the final point. But the main point there is using the metaphor that's a very good metaphor that a lot of people will use, but talking about, yes, social capital. I will often say relational capital, but the amount of relationship that you invest into someone and the amount that they invest in you. And this author uses it more as a bank account metaphor of, I'm depositing relationship to someone and I'm withdrawing. So when I choose to help someone or spend time with them, or they need to talk and I talk with them, I'm depositing. I'm adding to that. When I need something, I'm pulling. This is more just like a personal thing. I think using a direct bank account metaphor, I don't feel like relationships should be perceived as transactional to that extent, even though they are to some extent. And that's a personal thing. A lot of people would actually disagree and say they're entirely transactional, or they're not supposed to be. That's fine. My hiccup here is, if you're dealing with perfectionism, you probably need someone or a couple people in your life who can speak into that and support you, and that are willing to have that engagement, and who you trust to call you out healthily, and that you trust to share openly with. So the author recommends, your perfectionist behaviors, as they're going to come out of you and go in this other oriented way, to to try and pause and think about, is it worth it for the tax that you're going to put on other people? Is it worth it for the relational withdrawal that you will need? I think that can be helpful. There's a fine line between, encouraging people to be self-driven and not wanting them to feel like they can never reach out for help. So this is something where, he wrote a paragraph, and I'm sure talking to him in person, it would be more nuanced than that, because this stuff is very relational and very nuanced how you approach it. But yeah, so just some thoughts there on the article, why your perfectionism irritates everyone. Yeah, definitely a header to try and draw attention there. So be mindful of your perfectionism still. We're going to keep talking about it. I think we got 2 more articles on that topic to address over the next couple days. And just my main thing, I think, for a lot of people listening to this as we do this brief series, is to just pay attention to your behavior and ask if perfectionism is there. If it is, reflect on these videos, reflect on it yourself, involve people in your life. Maybe go to therapy, maybe you don't need it though, and just look at what's happening in your life and is this worth it? And that's assuming you're getting a lot of choice in that and it's not impulsive or there's other stuff going on. But if you're choosing to have this perfectionist mindset where you're like, no, I have to think this way, is it helping you? Does it serve you to believe that? If the answer is no, what are you doing? Why pursue it if it doesn't help you at all? For a lot of people, if this is you, your response to me is going to be, I just haven't gotten to that point yet where it's satisfied. And I will tell you, it will never be satisfied. It can't be, because perfection isn't a thing. It doesn't exist. It can be a goalpost at times, but not when it is at the expense of everything that makes us us, our identity and our health and who we are. Don't chase perfection. Do things well, absolutely. Work hard to do them well. You will not find that perfection. You'll have moments that you do things as close to perfect as you can, or as maybe anyone can, but everything in your life, it's not going to happen. And if you're self-defeating in that way, just prepare to continue doing that until you die. You're not going to outrun that. At the same time, if you can transition that into wanting to be excellent, and even wanting to work 100 hours a week, whatever, it has to transition to joy. You have to like that. It can't be this, I'm punishing myself. And you can probably end up finding better outcomes by shifting that. So just something to consider with that. See y'all.